morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome our home church. Let's also prepare our heart to heaven. Let's start sing a song, a holy song. Page 156, the Rainbow Song. 156, the Rainbow Song.
Rainbow to bridge old and new, Father, make me a gateway for many to come through. Father, you are the sunlight and the very of that. Father, make me a prism held in your hand. Father, you are the music. Make me alive. I am the kindling fire. Make me a fire. Our voices blend down into one loving song. The dream goes true now. Beautiful song, Father. Make me a rainbow to bridge old and new, Father. Make me a gateway for many to come through, Father. You are the sunlight in a very dark land, Father. Make me a prism held in your hand, Father. You are the music that you make me alive. I am the kindling, Father. Make me a fire. Our voices blend down into one loving song. The dream goes true now. Beautiful song.
Thank you. Next song, page 135, Near My God Thee. 135, Near My God Thee.
Nearer, my God, to me, nearer to thee. Though it be a cross that raiseth me,
again. 31. Oh my child, come home again.
Oh my child, come home again. How I beg you to come home. Though your sin be deep and dark, and your burden hard to bear, still the Lord of all will forgive you and accept you in His grace. For the heart of God is deep and wide, boundless and eternal His love. Oh my child, come home again. How I beg you to come home. How He searches every day for the children of His heart. Every night the Lord leaves the doorway open wide for their return, and He longs for them to come back home. All the ones who left Him behind. Oh my child, come home again. How I beg you to come home. Though the whip has stung your back, in the tender hands of God, all your suffering path can be lightened, and the Lord can ease your pain. Come and rest within the Father's heart. Oh, my children, quickly come home.
Thank you. Let us stand up and bow to Heavenly Father, God, and to parents. Today is Sunday morning, 2018, July 22nd. Let us bow to Heavenly Parents and the true parents. Monbe, hello. Join with me prayer. 살아계시는 하나님 아버지, 참 부모님 안녕하십니까? Most precious our Heavenly Father and true parents, good morning. We are so grateful to receiving new day and a new week. You're giving us the old or young and the tall, the small, for the equal love of beautiful love you're giving us. We are so grateful to receive your love and guidance today. Last past week, I had difficult time to keeping up my health. I got the cold and pain. But I thought about the changing. Even midst the difficult time, we can change and have a hope and love and goodness around us if we can choose to be good and loving. We are so grateful that our Christ showed us how to love and how to forgive to the even sinful people. And we are so grateful to receive your love and truth this time. Through our pastor can show us how to go through our life to the life of gratitude to you giving us life and family and neighbor and community and the world. Through that relationship, we can create a beautiful world. We can start again to love each other and even make mistake. We can have a deep heart to forgive them and start loving, and our heart can heal and we can rebirth. Please God, today can learn something new and deep heart from you and truth. We are so grateful to receiving this time, and please please guide us. Thank you very much. We want to offer this sincere heart, and I report in the name of Raman and Tamik Montanaro, blessed central family. Aju, Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Please sit it. Welcome our Pastor Montanaro. Welcome.
Hi everybody, good morning,
Morning.
happy Sunday. Today is July 22nd, it's cloudy, gonna rain today. I want to talk about changing ourselves, that we're none of us where we're supposed to be. And through conflict, sometimes we change. Sometimes we don't change unless there's conflict. So Karl Marx, who did not believe in God or was angry at God, tried to teach that conflict was the only way that you could change. That change came, according to communist theory, according to the communist theory that Marx and Engels wrote in 1848, the Communist Manifesto. And the idea of later on dialectical materialism, which was developed by Stalin. The idea that change, people are stuck, they can't change, they don't want to change. And so that only when an outside force comes in and hits them, then they break. And then through this through this conflict, something new arises. Originally, this idea came from Hegel, the philosopher Hegel, and he had taught that centering on God or some ideal, sort of like Plato's ideal, you have a thesis and an antithesis, an idea and a counter idea, and these two things enter into relationship, and then a synthesis comes, which is higher than both the thesis and the antithesis. This was Hegel's idea, that the antithesis and the thesis together made a synthesis. But it wasn't based on conflict or violence, it was based on relationship. Karl Marx studied Hegel. Both of them were Germans and German philosophers, so Marx was angry at religion and angry at God. And so he flipped Hegel upside down. He got rid of God, the idea of God. And he said that the thesis is stuck and needs to change, and the antithesis comes and strikes it. And then this creates a new being, a new form. So his idea, of course, was class struggle. That the ruling class will never give up power. And so that the proletariat, the working class, has to rise up and strike out against the capitalists, the rich people, the people who run the businesses, the people who own the businesses. Take away the power from them, kill them, take away their land, take away their factories, take away the means of production, and then create the ideal communist society. So this vision of violent revolution leading to a peaceful, ideal world has been the force behind much of the world's struggles over the last 150 years since Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. There have been violent revolutionaries, especially in the last 100 years. This year is 2018. We're about exactly 100 years from the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. There was a revolution, I think in the autumn of 1917, which deposed the Tsar of Russia. And it was a revolution that was led by a coalition of various people, farmers and peasants and different people, that overthrew the Tsar and imprisoned him. But Lenin was in exile, and when he heard about the revolution, he came back and he took over the revolution. And actually he ended up murdering about 3,000 of the revolutionaries because they wouldn't unite with his program, which was to bring in communism. So we're about exactly 100 years have passed since the first communist revolution. And in that 100 years we've seen communism, first in Russia, and then as the World War II came to a close, Russia used a very great strategy to let the freedom fighters in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, in Hungary, in Romania, wear themselves out fighting the Nazis. When they were dead, Russia came in and was the great liberator and cleaned up the Nazis for those countries and said, we'll take care of these countries, don't worry. And at Yalta, in 1945, an ailing and dying Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Winston Churchill met with Stalin, and they conceded, out of exhaustion from World War II, they conceded all of Eastern Europe to Stalin. So Russia then expanded its power, became the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR. And that lasted for 70 years. And that power then spread, and we saw communist revolutions take over in China in 1948. North Korea fell to communism. Vietnam was under pressure. We tried to stop it, but we failed. So Vietnam became communist. Then Cambodia, Laos. Then in Africa, Angola, and other countries became communist. And we saw communist revolutions in Cuba. There was an attempted communist revolution in Nicaragua and El Salvador in the 1970s and 80s, which failed. But communism began to take over the whole world. 2/3 of the world's area was covered by communism at the height of its power. So communist revolutions, finally, it was proved by reality that the communist economic theory failed. That when you try to bring a peaceful world through violently murdering and destroying everyone who's on power, what a surprise, you don't create a peaceful world. Actually, the people that were the thugs, the communist thugs that led the violent revolution, then of course they want to take over power. So they took over power, and of course you think they're going to become peaceful, loving Boy Scouts? They became monsters, worse than the people they deposed.
Yep.
So when we look at the history of Lenin and Stalin especially, Stalin in 1937 and 38, he starved White Russia, Belarusia, was resisting his program of communization of the farms, collectivization of the farms. So he took all the food out of all the silos and either burned it or just took it away. And in one winter, 6 to 7 million people were killed by starvation. And communists have used starvation many times to gain control, taking away food and starving people to death. So this 6 million people in one winter, it makes what Hitler did actually pale in comparison to what Stalin did. It is estimated that Stalin and during the Russian, the purges in Russia and the various communist control issues they went through from the 1920s right through 1960s and 70s, that 70 million people were killed in Russia. And of course, Mao Zedong probably killed 40 to 50 million Chinese. Pol Pot killed 3 million Cambodians. staggering the mind, the level of murder that communism committed in the 20th century. Finally, it collapsed, actually largely due to Father. Reverend Moon battled almost single-handedly against communism, both in Asia and in the United States and in Central America and in Europe, all around the world. He sent missionaries and people who knew communist theory and could battle it on the intellectual level. And so in CARP, our student club, we went on college campuses in the 70s and the 80s, and we fought against CISPAS, the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador. They always use the word solidarity and brotherhood. This is the communist slogans. And then Spartacus Youth League, which was a Stalinist group. And actually there were KGB agents in America working to try to create disunity and unrest and sort of anti-government activity. And in that confusion, they hoped to take over more power and also to stop the United States from opposing them in Nicaragua, in El Salvador, in Angola, in Rhodesia, in Zimbabwe, in these different countries that were under communist siege. The guerrillas were in the mountains, attacking villages and attacking cities and at night. And then the governments had to become very militaristic to stop the communist revolutionaries. And then the communists used propaganda. They were brilliant at propaganda of accusing, look at this government. It's a militaristic dictatorship. Look at these people. So around the world they created an outcry against the military dictatorships in these countries, when they were the ones that were forcing the military dictatorship to exist in the first place. Brilliant, actually. Brilliant strategy. The communists were brilliant strategists, and still are. And these failed, only because Father made a movement across the United States and Europe and Asia. Look at what the communists are doing, and exposing the guerrilla activity and advertising it and making it clear that it wasn't a one-sided military dictatorship, that they were fighting against a bloody group of violent, atheistic, immoral revolutionaries who would stop at nothing. I had the honor of actually visiting with and sitting down with and listening to the testimony of one woman who had been a missionary for many years in Africa for our movement. And she was in Rhodesia, which later became, I think, Zimbabwe. And there was this struggle going on. And she said that she went out with the patrols into the towns, and she would stay in the towns talking with people. At nighttime, the revolutionaries would come, and they would say, who is speaking to the government here? Who is a traitor to the communist cause? And they would just grab people, old men, grandfathers, and they would burn them, but they would put tires on them, rubber tires, and set them on fire. And the rubber would melt and it'd stick to their bodies, so they couldn't get out. And they'd be screaming and they'd die. And the communists would then retreat into the hills. Then the military would come in and see that what had been done. And then they would torture the people. Well, who did this? Where are they? And the people didn't want to talk, because if they talked, then that night they were trapped in a sandwich. And she had seen this with her own eyes. This is what was going on in the 70s and in the 80s in Africa and in Central America. Father knew this, and he started the Washington Times, which was a conservative daily newspaper in Washington, to expose the communist activity and propaganda. And because of that, they got stalemated. They couldn't advance, they wouldn't retreat, so they got stuck. And because they got stuck and they couldn't develop, the poison backfired on them. Their own countries began to collapse from within. Only with the promise of a communist revolution that took over the whole world could the people in their own countries be suppressed. But when that stopped, the Soviet Union began to collapse from within, because the people were always miserable and unhappy. They had been murdered, tortured, and terrified into submission by the communist dictatorships. So, Soviet Union, centering on Gorbachev, had perestroika and glasnost, opening and softening of the communist rule. And finally, he disbanded the Communist Party. Amazing. So communism kind of ended with a whimper. But no one could have seen that in the 70s and the 80s when it was growing and taking over the world. Father did this. But the thing is that you have to understand is that this kind of thinking didn't go away and will not go away until we teach the divine principles throughout the world. Right now, the gender issue and the homosexual agenda is taking over America. And we have to understand that the intellectuals are the most likely to fall prey to these intellectual seductive ideas of Marxism, of Leninism, of these socialist ideas that teach that human beings need social control. Otherwise they can't be good. Human beings are like animals, you see. And only when the government is strong enough to control people will human beings behave properly. This is basic communist socialist theory. And it's very attractive to intellectuals who live their life in their head. People who live their life with their hands, who work hard for a living, they're not caught up in their head and in false ideas. They tend to be much more realistic and practical. If it works, use it, do it. If it doesn't work, throw it away, get something new. But intellectuals believe in theories, even if they don't work. Ivory tower theories that even if they don't work, they still want to propose them and push them forward. And so where do you think is the hotbed still? The only communists that still are existing in the world, where are they?
America.
Where though in America? And where in the world?
University.
In the universities. Professors and also in journalism. Professors and journalists are the ones who in the 60s and 70s were communist activists and socialists. And then when the revolution didn't come that they wanted, they went into academia. They became professors. They went and got their PhDs and became professors. What is a professor? It's a person who spent his whole life in school. It's a person who spent his whole life just studying theories and proposing his own theories and arguing with other people about theories and living in their head. And very arrogant, very proud of their own thinking and their own way of thinking. And they're all in the universities and in journalism and media, because they think that's where they can subtly make changes by influencing what people see. So journalism in America has become false, has become distorted and biased. Because the journalists themselves, by their own admission, 95% of journalists in America are Democratic Party members. They vote Democratic. 95%. Only in small towns do we see some more conservative journalists. Actually, I took a course in journalism in graduate school from a great journalist who had been in the newspaper industry and then teaching and involved in journalism for his whole life. Wonderful man, great teacher, for both the writing and for the spirit and philosophy of journalism. He said, if you're a journalist, you should not even belong to the Boy Scouts. You can't belong to the Rotary Club. You cannot belong to any political party. You can't belong to anything. Because if you're a true journalist, and then you belong to a party or something, and there's some evil or corrupt thing that's going on in that party, then you can't report on it fairly. He said journalism is like a religion of being unbiased. You have to not belong to anything. Very interesting, right? So that was the journalist credo for years and years, for 100 years. It was called the Fourth Estate by the Founding Fathers. They understood that journalism, and the journalists and the media had a great power. Not just the executive branch, the presidency, or the legislative branch, the Congress and Senate, or the judicial branch, the courts, but also the media. These four things together influence the direction of politics, of change in America. And so we have to understand that the media has become completely socialist, that and academia has become completely leftist and socialist. Whenever you see someone who's arrogant, you know that that person is not connected to God. And you will see that these arrogant professors and journalists invariably are socialists They're leftist. They're liberal. The word liberal, by the way, was hijacked by the left. The word liberal originally meant, almost like libertarian does mean now. Liberal simply meant someone who believed in the freedom of man. The idea that human beings should be free as much as possible to pursue their own dreams. Don't get in people's way. Let people have freedom. That's liberal. That's liberal. That's what liberals meant. But now liberal means supporting various leftist socialist causes which oppose freedom in the individual and support big government and state. So when we talk about changing ourselves, when we talk about change, we have to realize that the people that we have to work with and fight with, actually, are the most intellectuals, the most intelligent people in our society. So we need weapons, ammunition of words that is as intelligent, as critically thought out as they are. This is what Father provided to Christianity. Father came to America in the 1970s, and he provided a very clear, intellectually sound attack on Marxism-Leninism, centered on God. This was lacking in Christianity. It still is lacking in Christianity. This is why Christianity is powerless to stop the spread of socialism. Socialism is the last bit of what communism was. Socialism is the remnants of communism. And the idea of gender confusion and homosexuality and this idea of an immoral freedom, liberty, and license. These are destructive elements to a society because the family is the cornerstone of society, right? A man and a woman in love, centered on God, makes a family, has children, makes a responsible life and community and nation and world so that their children are safe and have a beautiful environment to grow up in. It's simple. Let me repeat that. God's ideal is simply a man and a woman centering on God, in love with each other, creating harmonious relationship, giving birth to children, and then taking care of the society and the community around them so that their children are in a safe, healthy place to grow up. That community expands to the society, to the nation, to the world, to history. So the family is the building block of a true society. Not the individual. Not the individual. The family, a man and a woman together. That's the beginning of a true society. That's simple. Anything that opposes that, anything that goes against that, is from Satan. You can know where Satan is in our society by anything that opposes the traditional true order of love in a family. A man and a woman loving each other, centered on God, having children and raising those children in God's will. Anything that opposes that is Satan. So when you look at college campuses today, and they're promoting, and even public schools are promoting the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and Q. I don't know what Q stands for. Queer, questioning. I don't know. But LGBTQ agenda. When you see the LGBTQ agenda being proposed and supported and pushed forward, you know that's Satan. And anyone that supported that is Satan, is in Satan's camp. Maybe they're unwittingly doing it. Maybe they're doing it because they're well-meaning, well-intentioned. They want to include everybody and love everybody, but it's still Satan. They're duped by Satan. Just like in the 70s and 80s, the intellectuals on college campuses who were supporting the Soviet Union because they thought that communism was a better way than democratic capitalism. They were in Satan's camp. Now, anyone who's supporting the breakdown of the family, the traditional, true, God-centered family, one man, one woman loving each other, and a true relationship forever, that person is in Satan's camp, and that idea is Satan. And that's our final battle. And isn't that great to know that's our final battle, guys? That's it. Why is that the final battle? Anyone know why that's the final battle? If we win that, it's done? How do you know that? How do we know that that's the final battle? There won't be any battles after that, in other words. If we win that battle, we win everything. The kingdom of heaven can be established. How do we know that?
Because it deals with the relationship between a man and a woman.
Which was what?
The cause of the fall.
The cause of the fall. So when we look at the fall of Adam, Eve, and the archangel, we look at a spiritual being who's very intellectual, very smart, smarter than actually Adam and Eve were, because he was with God from the very beginning of creation, Lucifer, and he knew God's plan better than even Adam and Eve did. And he seduces Eve, and then through Eve, Adam, with a sexual lie. A seductive sexual lie. And she falls in love with Lucifer, wrongly, and has a spiritual sexual relationship with Lucifer. Then, after that relationship made them one, she inherits spiritually from him, through being one with him, all of his intellectual, all of his wisdom, all of his knowledge comes into her. And she knows that he is not her true partner. She knows she made a mistake. She knows she was seduced. And she knows that she made a very deep sinful mistake. And she knows that Adam is her true partner. And so she goes back to Adam, regretting her decision, trying to come back to God, a better motivation. But all she knows how to do, in terms of pulling on somebody, is do exactly what Lucifer did. Lucifer taught her well. And so she seduces Adam, thinking, this is my true spouse. If I have sex with him, it'll all be fine. But she became the seductive force behind the relationship, instead of Adam being the loving force behind the relationship. So a seductive, intellectual began the fall. A seductive woman continued it. And so now in our society we see college professors seducing their students. We see older men with flash cars getting young women to stay with them, right? Young women will just jump into... You've seen that sociological study. It's hilarious. The same actor they used. He's, wearing drab clothes, boring duds, goes up to a girl and says, hey babe, this kind of thing, you want to come with me somewhere. He tries like 10, 20, 30 times. No one wants to go with him anywhere, Then they dress him up really nice haircut, they put him in a nice car, like a Ferrari or something. He drives up to the curb, says, hey girl, you want to come for a ride? They get in the car. Again and again and again, they get in the car. How stupid! Girls, how stupid are you? Are you that stupid? Are my daughters that stupid? I hope not. But this was done. They did a study like this. They filmed it. You can see. It's like your mouth is just hanging open. Girls like money. Girls want that money from a guy. If a guy has money, he can provide for them. He can give them security and support. Give them the lifestyle they want. Even if he's old and wrinkly, I don't care. Get my life the way I want it. If he's old, it's even better. Doesn't have enough sexual energy to bother me much. And then when he dies, I can inherit everything. So this kind of ugliness is in our blood. And homosexuality is also in our blood. Why? Lucifer is not a man like Adam. He has no seed. He's not a man. Father says in the divine principle that the angelic world is neutral or between masculine and feminine. In the world wars, he said that Germany was an Adam-type nation on Satan's side, and Japan was an Eve-type nation on Satan's side, and Italy was a neutral-type nation on Satan's side, between masculine and feminine. Same thing with the United States and England being Adam and Eve, and then France being a neutral-type nation. So he says, like the archangel, he says the archangel position is kind of neutral. That means that when Eve had sex with this intellectual sort of suave guy, I think of, there's a lot of homosexuals that are actors, right? And some of them are the most handsome, most suave and debonair in several films I think of. Runaway Bride? No. My Best Friend's Wedding. My Best Friend's Wedding, Julia Roberts goes to break up Dermot Mulroney's wedding with Cameron Diaz. And she gets her best friend to come. And he's gay. And everyone knows in Hollywood he's definitely very, very gay. And he even plays a gay guy in the movie. But he's incredibly handsome. He's good looking. He's very smart and clever, good with words, and he's gay. And many, many gay men are very smart, very intellectual, because they're very, they devote themselves to their mind and to the development of their brain. So actually Lucifer was like that. He was actually a neutral being. So we have homosexuality in our blood from that relationship that Eve had with Lucifer and that Eve had with Adam. And so we see that in the last days, all these elements that come from our deep blood have to come out and get cleansed. And so this whole LGBTQ agenda, the transgender movement, the sexual promiscuity, hooking up with whoever I want, no marriage, this is the final battle against Satan. This is all Satan. And we have to show that a good family is much more beautiful and attractive than that lifestyle. Because people learn by example. So every one of the blessed families has to stand up and be heard and speak out. Not with anger, not with ugliness, but just speak out clearly. The LGBTQ agenda is wrong. It's satanic. It doesn't honor the true nature of a human being. Being lesbian or gay or bisexual or transgender, you'll never find happiness because you cannot be with God. God cannot bless that relationship. If you're struggling with it and you report it to God, God will love you so much to help you, if you ask God, to transition, to get into a different mindset and to get into a different body. Like you have your body actually change. The hormonal nature of your body can change. We can change our hormones. Just like adrenaline is released when we're afraid, the estrogen and testosterone production of our body goes through cycles and changes in our life. It can be stimulated by our thinking, by our activity, by our nature, and by prayer. God can help us to become more masculine if we're a man who's feeling feminine feelings and homosexual feelings. God can help us become more masculine. God can help a woman become more feminine. If she's feeling very masculine feelings, very, tough, and not able to be soft and feminine and be able to be a woman, then God will help you. Just pray and think about it and study and pray and develop it and offer it to God. Talk to God. God is the author of this universe. God's the one who set up man-woman relationships. So if you talk to God, God will help you. But if you don't talk to God, if you want to be free if you want to be a homosexual, God's not going to stop you if you don't want to stop. This is the last days. This is the time when we're fighting this battle. It's going to be fought inside of us first. You have to fight this battle inside of you. You have to fight the homosexuality that's inside of you. Lesbianism or the gay, the bisexual, the homosexual nature, tendency that we have inside each one of us. We have to fight that and win with God. We have to fight the promiscuity, the desire to have sex with many partners. We have to fight the whole, finally, the real final thing is to trust God and to talk to God. Because that's the one thing that Adam and Eve lost before they fell, was their relationship with God. And so when we reestablish our relationship with God, God will help us pull ourselves together and become healthy and whole and sane. And we can make a good family. So please, work with God. Don't give up. Okay? And we have to stop the social movement in the universities. So if you're on campus, you should speak out. You should take the heat. Let people hit you. Let people hate you. You'll find such freedom when you do that. Right? When you spoke out in classes, at school, when you were at school, didn't you feel such a good, powerful feeling come after you spoke? Always. Wherever you are, whatever age you're in, you can feel free to speak. Speak your heart, speak your mind. When you do, God will come right into you. You'll feel all this power come that you didn't know you had. Because God will resonate with you then. Don't be afraid to speak. This is the battleground we're facing. Is speaking the truth. Speaking, what did Martin Luther King say? Speak the truth in the face of power. Right now, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer questioning movement is in power in America. In the highest realms, it is in power. Thank God recently, this Christian couple who ran a bakery refused a gay couple to have a wedding cake with 2 men on the top. They said, we can't make that for you, I'm sorry. We cannot make a cake for your wedding. And I think that's perfectly within their right to say, I'm not going to make a cake for your wedding. I can refuse service to anyone as a businessman. They were sued and they lost. But then they took it to a higher court. And I think that finally either the appellate court or the Supreme Court has ruled in their favor. Finally, that was a great victory on the courts. But you see the kind of climate we're in right now. If you speak out against the whole lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender movement right now, you're going to be in the crosshairs of their attack. And they will use any, just like the communists, they have no scruples about using any kind of underhanded means to destroy you. They will plant things on your person. They will frame you. They will attack you. They will spread lies and rumors about you. They will try to create a climate where you can't exist. It's a battle. But if you maintain your dignity and your position and your heart, and you speak the truth, you can win. God will be with you. This is the final, last, desperate battle of Satan. He's given up on the political level. Now he's working on the social level with sexual misconduct. Because that was the fall. Exactly. And when we beat this one, and we start to establish true families, that's it. Satan's done. True families put Satan on the run. This is what the gift that Father gave to Christianity. Christianity didn't listen to Father. They opposed Father. They helped put Father in prison. And because of that, Christianity has been hit and is declining. You can't fight against the second coming of Christ and not pay a price for that. You cannot oppose the second coming of Christ, Reverend Sun Myung Moon, and not get hit. It may take some years, but you'll get hit. When Judaism crucified Jesus in 30 AD, Jesus was crucified at the age of 33. He was born 3 or 4 BC. We're not sure because of the mistakes of calendars. They adjusted it. He was not born in Syria. He was born 3 or 4 BC. He died at 33 in the year 30. 40 years later, the Jews were destroyed. The Second Temple was wiped out by the Roman legions, and the Jews were murdered. The final 953 holdouts in Masada, a mountain kind of stronghold, were being starved and to death by the Romans. They were under siege. Finally, they were dying of hunger and thirst. The men put their wives and children to death and jumped off the cliff and killed themselves. This was the end of the Jewish resistance to Rome. Had they followed Jesus, none of that would have happened. They would have been blessed and they would have risen up and become the center of the world. Don't make the mistake of thinking, if you're a Christian, that Jesus came to die. You have to understand that Jesus' death was the result of ignorance and disbelief on the part of humanity, especially the Jews and the Romans. The Roman Empire collapsed and the Jews were scattered. Don't think you can oppose Reverend Sun Myung Moon, the second coming of Christ, and not get hit. You will get hit if you oppose Reverend Moon. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but God, you will lose God's blessing. And then therefore Satan will have a field day with you. Please trust Reverend Moon's teaching. Let's pray. Dear Father, we face the final battle in this fight against Satan. But we have to realize that Satan is in each one of us, in our blood lineage, coming down from Adam and Eve and the archangel, the fall, the sexual misconduct, the seductive evil, self-centered love that Lucifer initiated, Eve multiplied, and Adam fell also prey to. Our ancestors, our ancestors. And this kind of false, decadent, selfish, seductive love became the legacy that all of us have inherited from our parents. And we know that we don't want to blame or hate our parents, our grandparents, our ancestors. We want to liberate them and liberate ourselves. And so that means we have to, Father, cling on to you and find true love in our lives. And the Messiah came, Reverend Sun Myung Moon, the second coming of Christ came to open the door of the marriage blessing that could be a God-centered marriage to give birth to children who did not have any connection to that original sin. Father, please help us to be more vibrant, more on fire, more powerful, supporting Reverend Sun Myung Moon's ministry and mission by becoming second Sun Myung Moons and second Mrs. Moons and second true parents, Father, able to change the world by our love and by the truth, like Father did. Please bless this day. We offer everything to you in the name of Raman and Tamiko Montanaro, a blessed central family. I pray for every member of our congregation here and online that they can receive your blessing and connect to us more deeply and have a passionate, powerful connection to you, Father. I ask your blessing on this day. 축복 중심 가정 라만과 타미고 못하는 이름으로 보고드립니다. 아주 아멘. Thank you.